Welcome to this first workshop of this collaborative that a bunch of friends of mine and I have started, which is called LABSIP, Lowering Activation Barriers for Success in Physical Chemistry. And the idea is that we are trying to energize, re-energize, or newly energize teaching in physical chemistry. Let me tell you a little bit about who we are. We are a group of physical chemists from a variety of institutions with direct interest and experience in teaching PChem. Here we all are here. You will get to meet many of us in breakout rooms today. Thank you to all of these people, and thank you to all of our pinch hitter facilitators for being here today. Our goal here is to basically nucleate, at this point, a community conversation about how we teach physical chemistry and how we can teach physical chemistry better. Today's event is just a very, very first step on what we expect will be kind of a long road. So here is what we're going to do today. So we will work as a community, starting off in breakout rooms. We will work on thinking about challenges and resources, right? Challenges associated with teaching physical chemistry to our current batch of students with our current curriculum, and then resources that might be able to help us with this. We're going to do this all together in breakout rooms. In those breakout rooms, we just have some guidelines for you that we ask that you follow. The first is just be respectful of each other in the virtual space, right? We will be doing lots of brainstorming today, so please pursue productive disagreement, I would say. I think physical chemists tend to have, strongly held beliefs a lot of the time, interested in surfacing lots of ideas today, so please let that happen. Please be self-aware and refrain from any language that marginalizes anyone based on race, gender, ethnicity, or other identifiers. We want to model inclusive behavior so that we can continue to model that for our students as well. And please write things down, right? One of the most important outcomes for us of this meeting is what gets written down, right? We are archiving everything that's happened. So the first main question we want you to talk about in the first Jamboard is, what are the challenges that you and your students face with student learning and their successful completion of physical chemistry courses? And then the second question, what resources would be most useful to you and your students for actually solving some of the problems you have surfaced? I hope that was invigorating for all of you. I'm going to ask each of the facilitators for a very quick report out. So Brenda, you go first.
We want better textbooks that are more conceptual, that raise more conceptual questions, that provide more active exercises. We talked about POGIL. We also talked about enrollment challenges, which were quite serious for a number of us, and what we can do about that. And then in terms of resources, we tried to think about ways that we can encourage students who aren't necessarily theorists to think about the concepts that we're teaching without as much math.
Rob Berger, you're next.
So I'll echo that students' math background is a challenge, and sort of how you kind of teach to students of all different interests and different levels, and have them actually retain what they're learning. In terms of resources, we were talking a lot about sort of repositories of various things being helpful. So repositories of good animations, repositories of good problems to work on, repositories of sort of places to find literature and content on modern topics. So not everything that we're teaching is from the 1800s. That's a couple of key points.
Thanks, Rob. Connor Bishak is next, and then Ron Friedman is going to go after that. Connor, you're up.
Yeah, so I guess I would like to echo textbooks and math as kind of the two things we spent the majority of our time talking about. Another big challenge is teaching physical chemistry to students who have kind of different tracks. So in a lot of cases, when you have like biochem students and more kind of physical chemistry students in the same course, that's a challenge. And then also being able to integrate physical chemistry classes with an actual lab course and have them kind of complement each other.
Great, thanks, Connor. Ron Friedman.
Sure. We talked about the need for up-to-date textbooks. We not only talked about the math prerequisites, but a little bit about the physics prerequisites as well. Some of people were talking about how they use Mathematica or Python programming to supplement some of the ideas of lecture. The need for more modern labs we talked about. And then we also talked a little bit about how some of us do a point retrieval process in the classroom where students can actually get points back that they missed on an exam. And that helps both their grade and also their understanding of the material. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. Tim K., you're next.
All right, a lot of overlap with what's been said, so I'll focus on what is different. I think we spent a little bit more time talking about the challenges of integrating coding, because it is a really useful skill for students to develop in the PChem curriculum, but the wide variety of backgrounds and experiences with that makes it really challenging to integrate in a smooth way.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Matt Kubasic.
To echo what people have said, we talked a lot about the mathematical struggles our students have. We wanted to have, better textbooks, but also we spent some time trading YouTube channels that people were using to even supplement some of the textbooks. And some people have collected just sort of like, a reading list, chapters from various sources to make their own textbooks, because there is no perfect textbook.
Yeah, thank you. Carol Parrish.
So let's see, for challenges, we talked about the difficulty harmonizing lab and lecture, especially for smaller schools or schools without a lot of resources where they only have one or two equipment setups. And then perhaps they have to do a round robin through the lab, and then the lab content gets out of sync with the lecture content. And that's a real challenge. We also talked about the disconnect between, someone mentioned earlier, sort of 18th century content and modern applications, and how to balance those two. And then I guess the last thing I'll mention on the challenge side is how to deal with the sometimes negative reputation of physical chemistry and the intrinsic fear factor that some students are math phobic, and when they see, rather than seeing how the beauty of math and how it can be used as a tool to understand chemistry, as soon as they see an integral or derivative, they sort of are paralyzed and shut down intellectually. Resource-wise, we too talked about repositories. It would be great to have a safety repository, especially, often many of us are, finding labs on the internet or in the literature and, trying to implement them. But if it's not our area of expertise, it would be great to have some guidance there, especially with respect to safety. And so repositories to, good modern labs would be really great, as well as a, curated set of videos.
Great. Thanks, Carol. Carlos, you're next.
I'll reiterate this notion that PChem is scary, right? So lack of confidence for the students. And then in addition to that, another important challenge is that instructors usually have to cover too much material. And in terms of resources, I think the most important resource that hasn't been mentioned yet is it would be great to have a place where we can compare teaching approaches with other instructors. So a little bit of a community where we can discuss our approach to teaching and maybe share new ideas to teaching PChem.
Great. Thanks, Carlos. Daquan.
So I think one thing is the student fluctuation, PChem 1, maybe a little bit more, and PChem 2, a little bit less. And also there's fear from, in terms of chemistry, math and calculus and those knowledge. And sometimes chemistry students are a little bit less confident in those. And also I think there's some folks particularly mentioned about the PChem lab. We need to sort of renovate these curriculum because a little bit outdated for some of those experiments. And also we talk about some of the issues in terms of how to design a PChem content or curriculum fit to different students, right? So you may have biochemistry students versus people who's major in chemistry who will need a little bit more depth in terms of PChem. And there's, in terms of resource, we did mention something in terms of the writing requirement in the PChem laboratory. So that's a good sort of exercise for them to learn not just cracking a number, but also know how to develop the proper writing.
Kelling, you are next. Kelling Donald.
We identified many of the challenges that have been mentioned already, but so that includes, for example, the weak math background. One thing that came up too was, well, to phrase it the way we talked about it, effectively undoing the lies from Gen Chem, finding the best way to do that without frustrating students and using it as using them as stepping stones. PChem, the general stigma associated with PChem that has been mentioned already, and what and how much to teach, which was also a point that Carlos just made, and links to everyday life from various areas in PChem. For resources, having a homework platform was mentioned, guidance on low stakes grading, for instance, which people have been experimenting with in physical chemistry, and also connected to platforms as well, maybe a similar thing for lab activities that people can draw from and share with each other. Textbooks have been mentioned, and also there are people who have developed in our group. There was at least one person who developed a specific math for chemistry course that students are required to take in collaboration with their math department, and so that was a useful resource that came up.
Great, thank you, Julio DePaula.
One thing that did come up in relation to the discussion about replacing paper and pencil math with computational tools like Python, Excel, and so on. I think one of our group members said eloquently, "You're just replacing one activation barrier with another." The extent to which folks find math very difficult to get involved in, a lot of these same folks will find coding equally challenging, and so I think we need, in other words, if we're going to do that replacement, I think we need to do it very carefully.
Great, thank you. Kana Takamatsu.
Yeah, so I'm going to echo a lot of things that every group has said. Maybe emphasis on, it's not just about having the math knowledge, but knowing how to apply that to physical problems and actually engage with it. Thinking about our students and how post-COVID and how that COVID experience, they're challenged in general to how to re-engage with the material in. And I want to add for the resources, really emphasizing the resources online, not just for instructors, but also for student access, right? So that we can also remove some of those financial barriers as well.
Yes.
Thanks, Kana. Dimitri.
Yeah, so we, of course, in our conversation, we discussed those challenges already mentioned. And in addition to what was already discussed, the student preparation in general, not only like calculus and anxiety, but also some basic skills sometimes, like note-taking, that can be also a challenge sometimes. And talking about resources, of course, the software packages and online tools which help to cover some material maybe and do some computational experiments, and especially those which will take advantage of visualization and without coding maybe.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dimitri. Stephen Freed.
So on the challenges side, the biggest theme in our room was math, but I would say that one thing that we also spoke about was the question as to whether or not to take time out of the beginning of the course to actually re-educate or sort of reintroduce the math and the pros and cons of that, where on one hand it was felt, sort of taking time to sort of make the math sort of shown to the students, sort of decouple from the PChem is useful, but then at the same time, like the syllabus has a lot of content. So, what does that mean that you're taking out, by sort of re-emphasizing the math at the beginning? And on the resources side, our room definitely focused on computational resources. Mathematica got a lot of shout outs, but also so did Excel, which has been pointed out is like a very transferable skill to a large number of like different potential career paths, and also it can be more visual. So I think we sort of had a bit of a debate about whether or not to use sort of coding and more abstract sort of formulations versus more, GUI based ways of trying to use computation.
Thank you. And Nancy Levenger.
So I don't have to echo what you all have said, but one of the things that came up in our group that I think hasn't really been talked about is that the perception of students about physical chemistry prevents them from taking the classes. And this was particularly important in small schools where maybe the course enrollment is low, and so then the courses don't get offered as frequently, or they aren't even able to offer an actual physical chemistry course. The content gets rolled into another course that's not obviously physical chemistry. So that was one of the challenges that was raised in our group, among all of the other things that everybody has already been saying. And then the resources, there were a number of things we agreed that shared resources would be great. And it sounds like LABSIP wants to do that. And I hope that we all are able to share the resources that we have. There were a few things about us deciding on what is the critical content that should be presented that students should learn in physical chemistry. If they don't learn anything else, what is it that we think that they should learn in a physical chemistry course? And then whether or not there are, this was a minor thing, but since it's up on ours, ADA for labs, so like accessibility in the laboratory, and also active classroom strategies that people use. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Nancy. Thanks to all of our facilitators. Thanks to all of you. There's a whole lot that we, I think, just got out of this, and we don't actually necessarily know, what it is. So we will be going through everything that you guys left for us to look at in the Jamboards, in the saved chats, things like that, and trying to see if there are clear community consensus points where we can do some work together on this kind of stuff. Okay, so now we just want to take a few minutes to talk about content, and the way we're going to do this is to crowdsource sort of a fun activity, and you should take this as fun. So what we've done here is put all of the topics that could sort of ever appear in a PChem course according to textbooks, right? According to sort of, and we've put them into a couple of surveys here, or I guess sort of polling items. There's two different links. One is a whole bunch of quantum topics. One is a whole bunch of thermodynamics topics. We're going to take about 5 minutes, and you're just going to pairwise vote. This is the largest group of physical chemists that I have seen together to be able to do this kind of thing. So we're actually going to get some statistics about how people think and how people feel. I will not claim that this is a particularly scientific way of doing things, but this is going to be how people think and how people feel about specific content areas. So please go. It's going to give you pairwise, basically which one do you like better? This is sort of Reddit style voting, right? So let's just do this really quickly, and you can see the results yourselves as you go. Many people, we should be able to get, some pretty good data relatively quickly. Heavy load and we are crashing it. Oh,
we're crashing the site.
That in and of itself is an achievement.
Woo! Yeah. Okay. So, if any of you can get to it without crashing it, right, you can certainly do. Please feel free to play with this over the next hour. We can do this as a slow-mo thing. I also have Google Form versions of these lists that I will after the meeting, so we can get a little bit more nuanced information about how people feel about content. All right.
Thanks, Katie. That was what I was going to ask, is can we share with our other colleagues who teach PChem?
Yes. Yeah. And I've got, a list of about 150 people who couldn't be here today, but are also interested. And so I'm going to send these to these guys as well. And so again, we'll have a whole bunch of information that we can report back to you. I expect that there will be some interesting and heterogeneous responses.